All right, folks, it is December 10th. It's 2 weeks until Christmas Eve, so let's see what the Advent things are really going to start picking up now. Let's see what the Advent calendar has in store for us today. Scrooge, starring Seymour Hicks, 1936 British version of A Christmas Carol. 3 stars gets a ho ho. Sorry, 3 hoes gets a ho ho ho. This is, by the way, a very interesting version of A Christmas Carol. Seymour Hicks was part of the, prior to cinema becoming established as an art form, actors, firstly, didn't go to acting school. They simply got attached to a theater company early in their career, and they learned by doing. And acting wasn't realistic in the manner that we consider it a necessity for actors to be realistic now. So people who watch older films, say made in the 1930s and the 1940s, will often complain that the acting seems a little stagey, a little forced, a little exaggerated. And that's because you have actors whose training has been based around using gestures and facial expressions that can be seen by people in the third balcony 100 yards away, and modulating their voices in ways that can be heard by people in the third balcony 100 yards away. So people often complain that actors of this generation seem to be just a little bit over the top. Seymour Hicks is an actor of that generation. He plays Scrooge. The other thing that's interesting about Seymour Hicks is that he basically made a career out of playing Scrooge. So he started playing Scrooge, I think, somewhere around 1906 on stage, and played the character quite consistently on stage, from what I understand, for most of his career. And he actually played Scrooge in 2 film versions, one silent version and this sound version. This is actually quite an interesting version of the Scrooge story. They do a couple of really interesting things. The first really interesting thing they do is that you don't actually see Marley's ghost at all. You do see his face very briefly when Scrooge first sees him in the door knocker, but when Marley does show up, he is announced by a voice that says, "Look well, Ebenezer Scrooge, because nobody can see me but you." So Marley is actually invisible, and the camera focuses on Hicks himself. Hicks had a very, very expressive face, so he really does convey a tremendous range of expressions with his face, but does manage to mute it for the camera. So his facial expressions actually don't come across exaggerated or way too intense. They just convey an awful lot of emotion. So very wisely, they focus on Scrooge's terror. You also don't see the Ghost of Christmas Past either. The Ghost of Christmas Past is sort of a person-shaped frame around the edge of the screen, and everything that happens in Christmas Past throughout this film is seen through this sort of person in a robed shape frame. Why is this a ho-ho-ho and not a whoa-ho-ho? Why is it not one of the highly rated films? First problem, Ghost of Christmas Past is way too short. You basically get really one incident from Scrooge's past at all. Christmas Past just goes right into Belle watching him basically foreclose on a couple who've gone in debt. She dumps him, and that's it. Christmas Past is over. We move to Christmas Present. So the whole Christmas Past thing is completely ignored. Christmas Present, though, is very, very strong. And one of the things that's very, very strong in this film is it really doesn't flinch at showing you the poverty that Cratchit's family is going through. This is one of the few film versions where in Christmas Yet to Come you actually do get to see the body of Tiny Tim lying dead. Cratchit's family is very, very thin, and it's obvious that they're starving. And interestingly, again, you don't see the ghost of Christmas yet to come. What you do see is a shadow of the ghost's hand with this finger always pointing, either falling on the face, falling over Scrooge's face, or falling on a wall. So that's an interesting effect as well. So, interesting movie. The other thing that's really neat about it is that it takes a considerable amount of time not focusing on any of the major characters at all, but just focusing on Christmas happening in London. So there's a wonderful bit when you see what's going on in the Lord Mayor's house, this huge party that happens at the Lord Mayor's, including a toast to the Queen. There's this really interesting montage where you see family, the camera is panning across a street, and you see silhouettes of families against windows, obviously enjoying Christmas together. So, see this if you can. Interesting take on A Christmas Carol. Would have needed more Christmas Past, and by the way, the guy who does the Ghost of Christmas Present is quite strong as well. That's one of the strengths of the film. So definitely worth a look. Almost forgot to mention Hicks's voice. So remember again that Hicks is an actor of that earlier generation of actors. In that earlier generation of actors, there's a musical quality to the way that they enunciate their lines. It was part of the way in which they made you able to hear their voices from the third balcony. So they almost seem to be, just in the way they enunciate certain lines, on the verge of singing. There's an operatic warble in Hicks's voice as he enunciates his lines. So it's very, very interesting to watch it, just as a piece of acting history for that as well. All right. Hope you've enjoyed today's mini review, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.